On this episode of ResiWeek, Klipsch partners with SnapAV for exclusive distribution throughout the United States. There are several bills making their way through state legislatures here in the States that will require an electrical license to pull PoE cable and smart home privacy, what you need to know. All that and more. Next on ResiWeek.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
This is ResiWeek, episode 178, recorded Monday, June 1st, 2019. Everything to everyone.
Support for AVNation is brought to you by Access Networks and by Draper.
This is ResiWeek, the weekly look at the residential AV market. My name is Tim Albrecht. I am your host. In for the celebrating Matt D. Scott. It is Canada Day today, and he's Canadian, so there you go. Happy Canada Day. With me to discuss the information and news that we have gathered this week, first and foremost, Josh Willits from Portal.io. Welcome, sir.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Also with us is our buddy Bryce Nordstrand. Bryce is from Access Networks. Welcome, sir.
Hey, Tim. Great to be here.
So a couple of stories. The first one we're going to hit actually comes to us from CE Pro. There was a bill, a Texas bill, that was going to require an electrical license to pull PoE, so power over Ethernet. I want to be very clear here. There was one. That bill has since died in the Texas legislature. The reason we're keeping this on the docket, is because it's not the first one, and it probably won't be the last one. From the article, quote unquote, two bipartisan bills that were introduced earlier this year in the Texas Senate and House of Representatives would have required any wire supplying more than 50 watts of power to be pulled only by a licensed electrician. So to put that in English, it means any circuit that supplies or controls more than 50 watts of power would not be exempt from the new law and therefore would require an electrical license. Josh, we'll start with you on this. Not for nothing, but there's a thing called PoE and PoE Plus, and lots of things run on it, including wireless access points, new PoE lighting, PoE speakers, where there's an entire group here, and currently, in most states, the AV integrators, the residential dealers can pull this with no problems at all, with no electrical license. There is a move, though, and several organizations are keeping track of it. NSCA is on the commercial side of these laws that are trying to get passed. First question, though, is what's the move behind getting these laws passed to kind of make pulling PoE basically Cat 5 cable, but category cable, but pulling that by a licensed electrician?
Well, it's because electricians are organized. We were talking about that before we started recording, right? So that's really what's driving it in legislature. So I think that it's starting to touch our industry more, but this has been a battle that's been happening for years. And I will say that CEDIA does a really amazing job following this stuff. In my experience, and going back, I remember 7 years ago hearing a presentation on them, and they knew exactly all of the bills that were out there in the different states and what the status was. And they fight very hard on behalf of the channel. So kudos to them for that. And I think, I think that's what's driving it at its core. And so certainly with the newer technology that's out or coming out, and even the audio stuff, that there's new technologies coming out from major manufacturers even later this year at CEDIA that I've heard that is based on PoE audio. I think it's more present in commercial, but it's coming into Resi as well. And so I think it's making it more important to watch what's going on here in licensing. Now, we've been talking for many, many years about dealers getting their electrical license or teaming up with contractors that are electrical, because I don't know how many integrators really think that what separates them from competitors is their ability to pull cable and that it's a real profit center for them. But it's still something that we have to keep a close watch on for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Bryce, from a technical standpoint, is there, in your opinion, is there a legitimate reason to make sure that folks that are pulling category cable need to have an electrical license?
Um, Not really. I mean, the reality is that, and this, I won't make a lot of electrician friends with this, but most electricians don't pull cable as neatly as most AV integrators do. And especially with small, delicate cables like Cat 6 and Cat 5, I've been around some electricians that are pretty hard on those cables and are the reason why those cables don't work sometimes. Now, there's obviously people that do those things as well in our industry, but it takes a different skill set. And but I want to kind of go back a little bit. I don't think that this is the end of the world for us as an industry. I mean, there's a lot of people fighting this for good reason, but there are very successful integration companies in our channel that do zero wire pull, and they sub it all out and they sub it to electricians, because in certain cities and certain states you can't pull wire if you're a low voltage guy. You have to be an electrician and you have to be licensed. And you talk to those companies and they're just like, well, here's the spec and you have to meet the spec. And if you don't meet the spec, then you're not doing my jobs and I'll find somebody else. So now you're a little bit more in control of your destiny and getting good quality work. And you start weeding out the bad electricians and get the good electricians. So there is kind of, some good and some bad with this whole thing. But I think as a whole in the state of Texas, this would be a bad thing because of my understanding in Texas is there isn't a very tight regulation on AV integration licensing there. So it's not like other states like California, New York, Nevada, where they've got really tight legislation. So I think it's there would be a little bit more damaging to our industry. But the long run is, I think that there's a real possibility that this doesn't really affect us as an industry very greatly. We'd still be able to sell and do a lot of the same things we do. And I don't know any electricians who want to put network switches in that power all those devices. So.
Well, that actually, you bring up a really good point. I have a buddy of mine in St. Louis here that St. Louis, it depends on where you go in St. Louis and the job site. There's a lot of union work that goes on, and certain parts of certain ones of those require a union electrician to do any sort of wire pull. And it's not a Missouri state regulation. It's just that the way that the agreements are within the construction industry in St. Louis. And I was talking with him, and he's like, you know what? It's actually those are some of my easiest jobs, because you're right, Bryce. They walk in, and then they give them the specifications, right? This is the wire. This is the quality of the wire that I want. We will be testing every single end, right? Because they're required to put the ends on as well. And so his team walks in maybe a day or two later than what they would have, because they don't have to pull. And then they walk in with the gear and they test everything and they plug it in, and then they start their work. So they're actually freeing themselves up a little bit. Yeah,
and the thing about as an AV integrator, what you want to be able to do is install if you have a certain defined amount of time in the day, and let's say it's 8 hours, and what would you rather be doing? Would you rather be pulling wire, or would you rather be installing very expensive devices? Everybody's going to tell you devices because you're going to make more money. And if you're pulling wire, the cost of labor and the cost of the product and how much the return on that, it's not as high. So that's why you see integrators that are very successful in specifically New York is one of the big cities that pushes this, that they either have an electrical license and they can do it themselves, or they sub it all out and specify it, and they're hands off on that, and they're very successful because of it. So it's a double-edged sword, and depending on where you are in the country and the current legislation in that particular area could, dramatically or definitely affect your current go-to-business model. But that doesn't mean that it's going to, make you go out of business. It could just change how you do business.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, folks. Our next story comes to us from technologyintegrator.net. Klipsch is partnering with SnapAV for national distribution, according to the article, quote unquote. SnapAV is expanding their network of brands and partnerships, continuing to grow. On the heels of their acquisition of Control 4, SnapAV was in Indianapolis this week to take part in a major announcement involving Klipsch Audio. Makes Klipsch and SnapAV the exclusive distributor for Klipsch in the U.S. here. Bryce, we'll start with you on this. This is an interesting move to me. Klipsch is a higher end speaker brand. SnapAV continues, in my perception, to not just expand their lines, but also expand their footprint. They here in the Midwest, they purchased a couple of high profile distributors up north of me here in the Chicago area. What was the thinking, or what do you think the thinking is behind SnapAV picking up Klipsch? Again, they're not purchasing them; they're just becoming the exclusive distributor for them.
Everything to everyone. I think that's what it is. I think it's about having, I think the key phrase in that article was they have, the average integrator has 2 or 3 speaker lines. And if you look at what Snap has, they have one with Episode, and, they needed, they're going to pick up another one with the Control 4 acquisition. So they really needed one more to kind of round out that whole offering. And if they continue to do so, they'll snap up things that make sense for their business model, to be able to cover their bases as far as a product category. So if it's video over IP, they already have their solution, but they're going to probably be looking for one that's on the higher end, and that might be coming the way of Control 4. If the wire or mounts or power, they're constantly looking to acquire, or a way to get market share, even if it's not through acquisition, if it's through partnership. They're constantly looking for ways to do that. None of these moves are surprising to me, and I'm sure we'll see a lot more of the regional acquisitions that they're doing. They did one here in Southern California as well. So I think that's going to be a continuing trend until they have a national footprint.
Josh, you can correct me on this if I'm wrong or thinking incorrectly here. Is it in my head, the way I'm looking at SnapAV, they have shipped things, obviously, across the country, no big deal to get things. Why do they need a national footprint on a local level, I guess is the best way to put that?
Well, in general terms, we're a pretty small, somewhat niche industry. And I think that you only hit a certain percentage of the market who can ship into a warehouse or has a location that can accept shipments. And there's a lot, and distributors have been saying this for many years, there's a lot of will call business. There's a lot of guys that want to stop on their way to the job and pick up everything they need from their local distributor. They're relying on them for the support in terms of design. We talked about that the last episode that I was on, just about distributors helping dealers design systems, picking the right products. There's a lot that happens that could float completely under the radar of a big company that is shipping product out to dealers. And so I think that's been the driving force behind the obvious acquisitions and putting this footprint in place that serves dealers where they are. So, I mean, I think that's the biggest thing that I see in answering your question.
Yeah. If you look at the distributor in Southern California, because I'm pretty familiar with who they acquire here, they don't just service AV integration companies. They service electricians. They service pool guys that need speakers for the pool. They service a whole bunch of other industries. And as long as you have a resale capability or you're a business, they're willing to do business with you. So that opens up, as Josh was saying, a much broader market than what you would get with just our little AV world. Security guys, everything that Snap maybe doesn't have a foothold, or as good a foothold inside of.
And remember, it's not just Snap here in this deal. This is a partnership with Klipsch, and I believe this is for the Klipsch brand specifically, not some of their subsidiaries, which are distributed, but for the Klipsch brand, who's mostly direct. I think there is going to be a concern with dealers about, the exclusivity of that brand, and the access to that brand is definitely going to open up a little bit more than it was before through the partnership. But they also, as most direct manufacturers struggle with, had issues with distribution itself, fulfillment on the fulfillment side. And having a partner like Snap really takes them over that hurdle not just for anybody in the channel who needs to access that product, but especially for their direct dealers. I don't know how that relationship will play out, but I see a big opportunity there to improve the buying experience for all the dealers.
At this point, who is Snap's biggest competitor? I guess the best way to ask this, as they're getting more and more, building on their regional distribution centers by acquisition, and getting more brands. Who's their biggest competitor?
Everybody else.
I would say it's
company.
The interesting thing about Snap to me is that they came at it they designed their own products and kind of created their own brand, and then found their way into distribution. Most distributors started as, in distribution, and then started these white label brands and started actually selling their own speakers, their own mounts, and all of this stuff. And so they both came at it from different directions, but that places Snap squarely in the lane of the Wave Avids, the ADIs, and all of the big distributors that are doing enough business and starting to cross over into other verticals like security and like electrical that have these national footprints. I think those guys are the biggest obvious competitors in my mind.
Yeah, I think from our point of view, it's a little bit different from Access Networks' point of view. It's probably a little bit different because we compete with companies like Snap and other distributors and distributed lines. We compete against program more than we do against performance. And program can win. Program can win a lot of times based on how much VIR dollars, or you get a free van, or you get van wrap, or whatever promo they're running at any particular time. Those kind of things can be very attractive. But a lot of times when you look at competition, it's all of the other brands that are very performance driven, kind of against the program. And I look at Snap, and Snap's kind of the program. They make some decent products. They make some products that I've personally used, but would you call them high performance? I don't call Snap high performance products. That's just not something that I would put those two in the same category.
Well, that's a key distinction and point there is the idea of the program. And I think we mentioned this briefly before we started this session, but the fact that it's a lot easier for a vendor to sell a dealer a product, more of a product that the dealer's already familiar with, than selling the dealer a new product. So let's say if you guys are selling Ruckus at Access Networks and you go into a dealer, you're hoping he's buying Ruckus from somebody else who's not doing a good job supporting him selling Ruckus, right? And then you can shift him over to get it from you, or you can go into a dealer that's not selling enough Ruckus. He could sell more of it if he has the right partner. That's where Snap is looking at all of these different brands. It doesn't compete with their stuff. It's being the shifting that dealer versus going into a dealer and saying, oh, I know you sell Ruckus access points, but let me show you this fancy access point over here that you'd have to totally train your staff on and learn how to sell it differently and learn how to install it differently and all of this stuff. It's way harder to do that. I speak from experience, even with some of our own programs. It's a challenge to get dealers. That's why you have a sales force in play that focuses on shifting dealers, but it's a lot more difficult than saying, oh, you love that brand? Guess what? We have it. Buy it from us. We're a better experience.
And is that just because of the heavy lifting when it comes to getting a brand new brand off the ground? And maybe not even a brand. Maybe I said that wrong. Maybe they know the brand, but they're not currently selling it.
It's about paradigm shift within the company. That's the hardest part. Is you've got a sales cycle, and some of these companies, the sales cycle is anywhere from 6 months to a year and a half, depending on the size and scope of the projects they're doing. So you talk about something today, and you're going to talk about it again in 6 months because you're probably not even in the bid cycle yet. So it's very difficult to get them to do that kind of paradigm shift within the company. Usually what you're looking for is, in anybody who sells a performance product, what they're looking for is for a non-performance product to fail. And once that failure happens and the company gets bit, then they're looking for a solution, and they're going to move a lot faster. Yeah. And so that's what you have to be open to that opportunity. You have to be looking for those opportunities. So
Yeah, it's in the performance category, so I think it is category based, versus a mounts category or even some of the speaker categories. So I think that plays a role, but I also think the emotional attachment to specific brands plays a strong role as well. These dealers have existing relationships and an emotional attachment to maybe a specific brand. They like telling the story of Klipsch, for instance, and they don't want to move their business to another brand. So I think both of those things play a role.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Last story here before we let you get out of here. This comes to us from our friends over at ResTech Today. This is written by Jay Basin, and Jay writes about smart home privacy, and he outlines a number of the failures over the last year or so, and a couple of the triumphs. And I'm going to start with you guys, with you, Josh. Jay talks about and kind of compares and contrasts Google Home and Amazon Alexa and some of the other, obviously, the IoT devices. But if you were advising somebody today who was, I want to do the whole IoT thing, or I want to work with a dealer and get some IoT stuff, what would you tell them if one of their concerns is privacy? How would you best safeguard yourself?
If I'm an integrator, I would say the first thing I would say is if you're looking for for privacy, I'm your guy. Like the only one who can help you is somebody who knows everything about privacy when it comes to these devices and technology. I mean, that's the value add that dealers present, because this market, this sort of high end, higher net worth individuals are more sensitive to privacy. And so I would lead with privacy when it comes to those talks and those transactions. I mean, look at and this is not a setup. This is my Amazon Echo, right? You can see there's no wire plugged in because it sits on my desk as a stop. I don't plug it in because I don't, and it's not just privacy, but that's certainly a component of it as well. So I think, and there's some companies out there doing interesting things like Josh. AI stuff is interesting because they're approaching it from our industry's perspective of privacy is the most important thing. So work privacy in with the AI technology and voice control. And I think that's really important. That can help dealers set themselves apart from the traditional IoT space that is pushing up.
All right, Bryce, same question.
So I think that one of the problems that we have, or one of the things that we have to realize as an industry, is that these companies, Amazon and Google and iRobot, if they're selling data from their vacuums to third parties or making that third party available, what we have to realize is that they're going to move at a much faster pace than what our industry is typically capable of keeping up with. From both an investment, you have to invest in a lot of time and manpower to actually understand and look at all of these things and see what's going on. From an investment perspective, and then from a product perspective, you have to go out and buy these products, and you have to live with them, and you have to understand them, and you have to do all these things in order to confidently go into a client's home and say, this is the issue with this, and this is possibly a privacy thing that you may be concerned with, or it's not. It takes a lot of time and money to figure all of this stuff out. And as you can see with this particular scenario, unless you read the article, you probably had no idea that the information was coming from your vacuum and being fed over to another device. And as an industry, what we need to do is follow best practices for privacy. And a lot of that starts with, fortunately for Access Networks, it starts with network implementation and being able to isolate IoT devices. Most IoT devices now talk to the cloud before they talk to anything else in the house. And they go out and come back in, meaning they go to the cloud, they come back down to your device. So even if your device is on a different subnet within the house, it still can talk to that device based on it being communicating through whatever cloud service they're using. So you look at what Apple's doing and what Apple announced recently with where they're going. I think it was Apple, but they're going to be providing a separate VLAN capability for IoT devices. Which is something that if you're a network savvy individual, you can already do a lot of those things. Yep. So those best practices are important. The reality, though, I think is it just takes a lot of time and money to stay up with it. And luckily we have people in the media that are doing some of that homework for us, because I wouldn't have realized that my robot, because I have one of these robot vacuums. I had no idea that it was talking to somebody else. I thought it was just cleaning my floor. So,
security. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, it's just an interesting thing to try and keep track of and to try and stay on top of. And if you follow best practices for installation and for design, you can protect most of your clients from these kind of things.
I think security aside, just the reliability aspect of having a product that is constantly connected to the cloud is a major issue. Last week it flew under the radar, I think, for a lot of people, but last Monday, a little ISP in Pittsburgh changed their routing tables and propagated that out to Verizon and then the rest of the world, and basically took, I think it was 6% of the world's internet traffic and funneled it into a black hole until Verizon was able to fix the issue. And so, all of those devices that may have been trying to hit Google, Amazon, Facebook, they were all affected by that. People see that when they're using IoT devices and it goes down and they need to access their locks or they need to look at their cameras, and all of a sudden it's unreliable. Now you can't, cameras access or remote access to any product is only as good as the internet connection. But there's also a lot of products out there that, don't have to rely on internet access in order to work. And our industry does a really good job with that stuff. So I think it's a big selling point. And
I think that's one thing that our industry should continue to focus on is creating products that are kind of a me too from an idea perspective, to some of the stuff we're seeing. Like Josh, they're obviously in the forefront of voice, but they're holding so much of that data locally and not really using any of it to the cloud. That's important to a lot of the clients that would have Josh in their home. And I think that those are the kind of things that we need to see, other companies continue to develop, whether it's Control4 or Savant or whoever else is playing around in those type of devices. And it's important for integrators to educate themselves, which again is the time investment, on what the pitfalls are of using the mainstream devices in high profile client homes.
Well, in Bryce, to your point, it is somewhat Me Too, but it's a professional version of Me Too, right?
Right. Yeah.
I point back, and this is not a plug, but Barco was one of the first companies that I noticed take the wireless video and do it in a commercial way, right? And then we all saw, when Apple came out with AirPlay, and I worked at a community college, and professors and the president wanted to be able to throw the video up just like I can at home, right? And so for a long time, Apple TVs were deployed in college campuses, in boardrooms, because that was the only consistent way to do it, even though it was a security nightmare and IT departments hated it. And then other companies came along and said, oh, you guys want to do this? Okay, well, let's do it in a little bit more secure way and a little bit more, a proper way and following a little bit more procedures. But you're right about the whole Me Too side.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, that is actually going to do it. Mr. Jotz Willits, thank you so much, sir. How do people find you or Portal.io?
Portal.io is the website, and my email direct is josh@portal.io.
All right, very good. Mr. Bryce Nordstrand from Access Networks, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
How do people find you or Access Networks?
www, it's a lot longer to say than World Wide Web, but .accessca.com. And then my email address is bryce@accessca.com, or you can reach anybody in our sales department, sales@accessca.com.
All right, very good. My name is Tim Albright. For me, don't follow me on the Twitters, but go by the website, AVNation.tv. That's AVNation.tv. You'll find this program and a host of others, including our other weekly program, which is the one that I normally host. It's our commercial AV weekly news. Also, check out our digital signage show, architect show, and so much more. Also, while you're there, check out our supporter section. These are the folks who help us financially, help us bring you ResiWeek and all the other coverage, including CDA coming up in about 2 months. And Access Networks is one of those, so we thank them for their support. So all that and more at AVNation.tv. That's AVNation.tv. Thanks so much for listening. Thank you so much for watching. That's all the time we have for ResiWeek.